Good morning, Wayne Miller with the Providence Journal, and welcome to our Facebook Live session. We have today with us Mark Gonsalves. You may have read about his story in the Providence Journal. It was called Redemption, the Fall and Rise of Mark Gonsalves. And we also have Anthony Thigpen from Lifespan's Transitions Clinic, who is a very instrumental person in Mark's road to recovery and has remained in touch and remained a good friend and an encouragement to Mark. So why don't we just start, why don't we start with Anthony and just the kind of work you do in general, because it's important work. It's for people who are currently incarcerated or previously incarcerated, and then we can get into what you've done with Mark, and Mark can tell some of his story. So I'm going to give it to you, Anthony.
Okay. What I do is I support men and women coming out of prison, connecting them to different services in the community, more like the boots on the ground for their primary care doctor, which is over at the Center for Primary Care Center on Chapman Street. And I like to say just building lifelong support relationships for people who've struggled with different things in the community as far as drug addiction, suicide, poor healthy lifestyle choices, things to that nature.
And so, Mark, do you remember first meeting Anthony and what he did?
Yes. When I went to my doctor's appointment, my doctor walked in and he explained to me. And this is after going through different medical and having a couple different doctors. And so this doctor walks in and, he's young looking and, he has a ponytail and I'm looking at him, I'm like, all right, but I don't, I can't hold judge because I know, the information and intelligence I actually have is whether I use it or not. But he walks in and he starts to explain this new program that Lifespan is using, and he asked, he introduced me to Anthony, and then he introduced me to another woman that's involved, case manager. Anthony begins to tell me about being in prison and stuff.
And you had been in prison over the years many times and a long time, yes.
I was, for most of my, from 17 to, 40s, I was in and out, and I living the street life, and I was just stuck on stupid, I had a good job. I was in the union at, one point for, 13 years, making good money. And then I'd get my check and want to do other things. And so seeing Anthony, and he's got this Lifespan badge on, and I'm like, wow, that's inspirational. It gave me something to look forward to, because, I'm thinking to myself, my charges didn't even bring me to federal prison. So if it can happen to him, if I put in the work, and that's the thing, putting in the work, and, if I put in the work, that can, also, happen to me,
So Anthony, you didn't just sort of drop out of the sky and come into this work, having gotten a degree or whatever. You lived a life similar to Mark's in some respects in terms of gang involvement. Tell us a little bit about that, because I found that very compelling, and of course it's a very instrumental part of how you can connect with people.
Yeah, it's just like Mark. I started out real young. In and out from DYS in Boston at a really young age, all the way to in and out of jail, being a gang member, hustling, selling drugs. And when I went to federal prison, that was it for me. You know, I just didn't want to go back, you know, and I got out. People gave me an opportunity. I moved to Rhode Island, Tenney Gross and the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence. They gave me my first shot at this community work, and I kind of felt like this was my destiny to help people and be part of the rebuilding of my community and no longer be part of the destruction.
One element of what you do that struck me, and I'm sure Mark as well, is that you're always reachable. You will take a call from people you're working with now, people you worked with in the past, and so tell me why that's important, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mark and put the same question to him.
Well, when I was in the gang, one of my, older guys, he has said to me, like, you always answer your phone, that could be your last call. And it just stuck with me, and so now doing this work, knowing that, the challenges that some of my clients, some of my friends, people that I know have, they're calling on me. That might be their last call before they're, about to commit suicide, about to hurt someone, about to relapse, and so that's one of something that I stick to is I answer that call no matter what.
Mark, let's back up a little bit here in terms of your story. Anthony mentioned suicide. You had made more than one attempt to lose your life through suicide before June of 2015, and had not obviously succeeded in that attempt. So what were the factors? What was going through your mind on the night of the early morning of June 26, 2015, when you did go to the top of the Newport Bridge, 220 feet above the water, and this time jump? What was going on in your life at that time that brought you to that decision point?
So in my life, everyone has a different story, and abusive parents, yes and no were in part of my life, but not my biological mother wasn't. But a lot of people, their parents are on drugs and they're pimps and prostitutes, and that wasn't part of my story. And the decisions I made was on my own. I had choices, and I chose to make wrong decisions, and it turned into these terms. They don't just come out of the sky. A snowball effect. A domino effect. That stuff happens. And it just my life. I got sucked in, and the things I was doing, the drinking and some drugs I was doing, and fighting and headbutting and fighting and driving, getting DUIs and smashing the windshield, crashing a car, and I ended up getting a lot of trauma to my head in my lifetime, and the drugs and alcohol, with that didn't help. And then because of the snowball effect of my life, it's like being halfway in and halfway out. It just doesn't work. And I was my depression. I became depressed, and I wasn't happy with my life, and I couldn't see getting out of what I was doing, and I knew I was a better person. My mother, she raised me the best she could, and decisions I made, man, just were shameful, and
at that time when you made this decision, your mother was dying. She died about a month later. You had recently been laid off a job, and so these were things in your head too when you made that decision. But amazingly, you survived, and which of course is, you spent time in a hospital, and then you got connected with Anthony and other people who helped, and you've become, and I've used this word, I've used it both in the writing and in describing what your story is. You've become an inspiration. You've gotten, you got hooked up with Amos House, and Anthony, I know you were instrumental in that, and now you have a job at Amos House. And I guess the message is that recovery is possible, even if you've started a place which would seem to indicate recovery might never be possible. Just talk a little bit about the promise and the hope of recovery, even when you were in such a dark place as yourself, and there are other people still there.
And that's what brought me to my suicide attempts, thinking that the opposite, thinking that there was no end except for continuing what I was doing, not believing in recovery, not having the desire, not having some faith, not believing, that a God, can love me and give me some strength, and family can. And, I just started working on myself. The last time I got out of prison, I had never been homeless. I sold drugs most of my life and had money and was able always to have a place to stay. And now I got out of prison and I was homeless. My mother died before I, got locked up. So now this time, I can't stay at mommy's house anymore. It's big boy time, and I got out of prison and had to stand in line at a shelter, and it was just, it was a lot. I looked at myself that day real hard and said, 46 years old, and I have to go sleep in a shelter, and then I have to sleep in a shelter so I can get into a drug program. And, I told myself I have to start right then if I want that to work. So I had some, I had that fire, I had that spark. So I went to the shelter, then went to the Amos House program, and I put in work right away. I wrote myself a short-term and long-term goal list. I gave myself some direction, and I tried to follow that. That paper was like a contract to me, and I would check things off, and things that were, because it's not going to happen overnight. And I've been clean for 2 years, and it's still not complete. It's you have cancer, you don't stop going to chemo, So I just continue to try to work on myself, and there's tests all the time. I was just tested in donuts, but
some of the tests are big and some are not so big.
I stuck around at Amos House and just worked and worked and worked, and I told them when I got there, she said, in my interview, on my intake, she said, "What do you want to get out of coming to Amos House?" And I said, "I want one of them lanyards." She said, and I was referring to the lanyard they wear with their badge, saying that they work there. I wanted to be able to help people, because the places I had been, thinking they're good, thinking I'm having fun, not thinking about, the days after, the places, the insanity, I didn't want anyone to go through that. I didn't want anyone to stand on top of a 220-foot bridge and jump, and when they have children, thinking that's the best option to make in life, thinking that you're affecting your children so much that you think you're better off gone because a lifetime of misery would be worse for them, you know? So I just worked and worked, you know, and I listened. I shut the F up and listened for a second, you know? And the other day, they offered me a job, you know? And you know, I'm going to school. You know, there's a program I got into, the Reentry Campus Program, and you know, it sounds funny, but you know, you guys with your college degrees and no criminal record can't get this. You know, it's for people. So there's programs out there. It just goes to show that there's things out there, you know, when you think there's not, to help you, you know, and you know, you're not going to find it all in one place. You know, you have to work, though. You have to put in the work.
It's a remarkable story, and I think, by the way, Whitman Littlefield, our digital editor, who is a big part of this project and is now running the board, so to speak now, I think has some questions from readers.
So is Anthony's program a statewide service or just certain communities?
It's Providence. It's in the Providence area. We tend to have clients that are in Pawtucket, Cranston, not too far statewide because you have to get, you know, to the Center for Primary Care on Chapman Street in Providence. So it's not a statewide program.
Do we have any other questions, or?
Not right now.
Okay. How are we doing on time here? I know we have some time constraints. We can go on a little bit longer here. So, Mark, you one of your long-term goals, and you've already accomplished several of your short-term and a couple of your long-term. One of them is to become a social worker or counselor, or talk about that. I mean, because that's where the impact that you've already had can be broadened. Talk about where you want to go in terms of that.
Honestly, you know, from my heart, it's anything I could do to plant seeds and people going through the struggle that I chose to go through. You know, so I'm able, you know, going to school, I get some knowledge, the book knowledge, so I understand how to give the right delivery and I'm sorry, I just had a.
Your story has a lot of remarkable characters. Your children, who are very much a part of the story, you were alienated from them because of your lifestyle and things you were doing. You're now back in their lives, which is a great thing. So they're compelling characters. Your mother, Sarah Rose, I found to be an extraordinarily compelling and wonderful person. She saw goodness in you. I think this is pretty much the phrase I use, that other people could not, and she was always there for you. And you have said that one of your regrets is that she did not live to see you where you are now, which is certainly understandable. And you've also said, and this was just a line that I threw in the story, but maybe you can expand on this. You say another regret is the harm that you caused other people, and not just people in your immediate orbit, but you sold drugs to people who use drugs. And so talk about that. I mean, I think part of the work you're doing now is redemption in that regard, too.
That snowball effect, that domino effect that I talk of, you know, those dollars that I got from that one person came off of some child's plate. You know, that child wasn't able to, you know, have a more nutritious meal probably, you know, which, you know, it goes into your health, which good health helps you think better and live a better life. And, you know, you think that it's just that one person. Oh, he's a crackhead. He's this. That's one person. But that person has a family. You know, their children have to look up to them like my children was looking up to me when I became my own customer. And just it affects so much, so many. Today, you know, all the volunteering I did, you know, in the kitchen for over a year, you know, feeding the less fortunate. When they wake up off a sidewalk or a curb, you know, and from the cold, you know, when we walk by and the wind's blowing and our scarf is blowing back and, you know, we're putting on our gloves and you look down and you walk by them and, you know, then you say, look at this. I got to walk in the store and see this. You know, well, that decision I made, you know, probably, you know, caused that, you know. So it's just your whole community. So these people come in to eat and they say, Mark, oh my God, thank you. The food is good, thank you. And they're smiling. And then I look at them and I say, well, damn, you know, if they could get up off that curb, it's raining out, you know, they're wet, their backpack is soaking wet with everything they own in it, and they could smile at me. They could smile, you know. So it just makes me, you know, want to try to help, you know, to change, you know, put change in society. And, you know, when you do that, you know, from working in the kitchen for so long, volunteering, you know, I went through the culinary program and, you know, almost became employed, you know, and that was something mentally that all I cared about. That's being a social worker to me, because when they come in, you know, they have someone positive to talk to, and then volunteers from all over the community, you know, come in and help. And I explained to them, while you was in here and we served, you know, 449 people this Thanksgiving, you know, those people weren't on the streets. They were able to have a warm place to eat, a warm meal, a good meal, you know, when you know, they weren't selling drugs, they weren't committing crimes, you know, their child was able to get out of the cold, and they can come in there and they have someone to talk to, which helps their psyche, because some of those people, just because you see a bunch of homeless people on the same street, that don't mean they you know, associate with each other, you know, and some people are just isolated, you know. And so to me, that's all social work and counseling to me, you know. So I feel like I'm already in my position by doing that, you know. Yes, you know, we have bills and everything, but that's not the importance to me, you know. The value in it to me, the reward is, you know, making change so our children can walk down the street and be safer, and then without that fear in their heart of, you know, having to join a gang or you know, just end up being drug addicts. You know, we could look for a better future, you know, for everyone, you know.
So I'm going to editorialize just for a moment here. I think we're soon to wrap up, but so here's the editorializing. You know, we live in an era when greed and narcissism and self-interest and other motivational factors are widely publicized, and I think I've used the phrase rampant in the land, and that is certainly true if you look around, and not just in this country, but the world. It is so refreshing and inspiring to see people like Mark who are making a difference in everyday lives. And Anthony as well, and James Montero and the people at Amos House and all of the other people who get up every day, and their mission and they may not frame it as a mission, and they may. Their mission is to help other people, to engage in social justice, and, we're lucky to have people like this. Lastly, I guess, have to put in an emergency call 911. We always do that when we're talking about suicide. The Samaritans of Rhode Island are available as a resource, and there are other people. There's Lifespan, there's Amos House. And unless Anthony has any final words here, do you have any final words here? Or?
No, thank you.
Thanks so much for coming, and wow.